Kendall, it is great to have you here for Lunch with Friends in March. Can't believe it's March already. But it is really exciting. We're looking forward to being able to hear about who you are, what got you where you are, what's the work that you do with RRR Network. Jo, I might hand over to you, given that my internet seems to not want to play nicely today. But team, how we want to be able to run this is to hear from Kendall and ask some questions around what she's done and how she's been able to achieve that, and then really open it up to a conversation. This is literally Lunch with Friends, where we get to have an intelligent, intellectual conversation with the group of people that turn up. So I'm going to, Jo, throw to you to kick off, and I'm going to just turn my video off so that I don't lose you all.
Sure. Thanks, Jules. Kendall, thank you so much. I know this was a short notice. We sort of rejigged the calendar a bit, considering there's some pretty wild weather incoming in southeast Queensland. And so I was like, who's on the run sheet that is as far away from this storm as possible? And tick, we've got a Westie in our midst that that we could call upon. So I am so pleased to have you join us today. I was trying to think this morning about where we sort of first crossed paths, and I feel that it might have been, was it pre your role at RRR Network, or was it very early days?
No, it would have to be RRR, because I think good old Sue Middleton, I think, would have to been the connector on that one. So I don't think I met Sue until the RRR.
Well, very good. Well, Kendall, I would love for you to kick us off, give us a bit of a rundown of who you are, where you're based, what you're doing with your days. And because we've spent many a time yakking, generally with a glass of wine in hand, that there is plenty to talk about with what you've been doing, and especially interested to talk about your leadership journey and where you find yourself career-wise now. So love to hear you kick us off.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be able to have just really candid conversations about your experience as a regional woman pursuing leadership or a diverse career, because sometimes when we think about the regions, it can be very small labour markets, and that can be quite prohibitive to many women who are trying to secure meaningful employment or employment that matches their skill sets. So it's really nice to be able to share my journey and why that is. I'm so passionate about that, because it's what I advocate for is that geography should not be a barrier to your success. So I think that wherever you are in this country, you should be able to have equal rights and opportunities to pursue a career. So that's something that is that drives me in my work. But first, I'm in Margaret River. So I'm in the lovely wine region, Margaret River. Margaret River is called Wurundjeri country of the Wurundjeri people. And it's an amazing place to live and work. So the southwest region of Western Australia is probably the most populated region of the state. Interestingly, when you look at Western Australia as a space to be operating in, it is incredibly difficult. We're the second largest state by mass, in the world. And with almost 3 million people in WA, there's only 275,000 women outside metro area, from the very north to the very south. So for us as an organisation, the Rural Regional Remote Women's Network is here to connect those women, make sure that they're visible to policy that's being designed, to our key decision makers, that they do, as I said earlier, do have the opportunity to pursue a career no matter where they are, regardless of how far they are from education, upskilling, those tangible labour markets. Our purpose at the RRR Network is to understand and advocate on the key issues that impact RRR women in WA. And then we also provide connection and empowerment so they can achieve their goals, whatever they may be. We're not just here to say, you need to be a businesswoman from the regions and go for it. it could be that a woman needs the skills to start up her business to make jewelry, or she wants a side hustle at the markets. And, you know, so we're just here to, overall, I think we're here to beat apathy. I think apathy is a real big issue for many people in the regions, because you can really normalize your daily grind and your sacrifice. That is what it's like to live in the regions. So you get used to this idea that, to go to that specialist, it's going to take me a day's trip to get to Perth. I might have to stay overnight. Can I afford the petrol? Can I afford the accommodation? Can I afford then the specialist appointment? I might forego that. You know, so there's these little things that just get built into your life because you're so used to having to drive or not drive, or having to fly or not fly, or I can't afford it. And that comes back down to then education. You know, how do I upskill? How do I access education? What's the point? Will I really get a job? Can I afford the student debt? You know, all these things just start to compound living in the region. So that's what we're here to do, to kind of fight apathy and get those opportunities to women in the regions. And then also really advocate hard with our industry leaders on, you know, cast your net further afield, you know, look to the regions for talent. Because, you know, Jo, you and I have talked so much about how much talent is just sitting idle in the regions, and how industry really should be looking further afield to get them. It's just a matter of how to incorporate them into their workplaces. So we're really front and centre with industry leaders to keep reminding them that there is people out there. Don't talk to us about you can't fill spots, because there's people there that can work. So yeah, that's a bit of a nutshell around our work and why it's important. For me, my leadership journey and how I got into this role was actually after kids. You know, so I was working in an administration in Margaret River for a real estate agency, doing marketing and admin, and had gone back to uni because I was at UWA in the city and had deferred, but had moved to the country. Now you can't do distance ed for UWA. They don't allow it. So I had to transfer my entire degree over to Curtin University so that I could be in the regions and do Curtin education.
They still don't?
I'm not sure. I think for UWA it's very exclusive. You have to be there. Not. So yeah, I'll actually look into that. I'm interested about that. So I decided to go back to uni while I was doing admin, and I was doing an international relations degree because I really was into geopolitics, you know, international issues. And I had no idea if that was going to get me a job, but I thought, I'm going to finish this goddamn Bachelor of Arts degree and I'm going to do something that I enjoy, regardless of what the outcome is. I'm just going to push through and do it. So I was working full time, finishing up my degree, got married, had, you know, first kid and maternity leave. And so the year up of maternity leave, the decision was, do I go back to work at doing admin, or do I push through with this degree, finish it, make some sacrifices in the family in terms of income and what that all looks like? And I decided that's what we're going to do. We're just going to push through with this degree and see where it takes me. If I could perhaps get a job in politics. You know, I had, you know, big dreams of becoming an international spy. I probably watched way too many movies on maternity leave. I was going to be the next Angelina Jolie. So I thought, right, let's do this. Let's push through. And I, funnily enough, became really interested in counter-terrorism. It was something that just really piqued my interest all the time. There was a unit, and my lecturer at the time was Dr. Anne Ali, who's now one of our federal ministers, and she was my lecturer. And I was really good at it. But to be honest, picking out baby colours and baby names while I was reading articles around terrorism and death was really complicated time. So I ended up just putting that aside for a bit. But when I finished my degree, I went to Anne and said, look, really interested in this space. And she said, well, come and be an intern for me at my Countering Violent Extremism research unit at Curtin University. And I was like, great. It was no money, but it was this opportunity to build a network from the regions. It was based in Perth. I could do research. And so I was working on de-radicalisation programs across Southeast Asia. So understanding how a terrorist could walk back from terrorism. How could they do that in a community program? What did that look like in a prison program? So I supported Anne, who was writing a book at the time on that, to do all that research for her. And then Anne got into politics and she left. So during that time, I then went, right, I better catch up with all these other amazing people in this research unit next to me and say, I need to do postgrad. So I then went to Charles Sturt Uni and I did postgrad in counterterrorism and security studies. It was to be the master's, so I just still got 4 units to go to finish the master's, but just done the first part of it, so done the diploma. And I just absolutely nailed it. I just loved everything about this space. And it's really weird to know that, I was a star at marketing for ISIS. I knew exactly what it was all about, got like 100%, got a, Dean Excellence Award. And I thought, well, it's a bit weird that I'm so bloody good at ISIS marketing. Probably think not ISIS marketing, but I think I'm good at marketing is really where we get down to it. And so I did really well in that space. But whilst all this was happening, I've got kids. I'm in beautiful Margaret River. Am I really going to uproot all of this to head to Canberra? Because ultimately that's what the work was leading towards. And so I had to, look at this differently and go, well, what else can I do as a regional woman in this space? How can I get that interest? And I thought politics. Politics is probably my next best option. And can I do that from WA? And so there's a bit more in between there, but I'll skip that for now. And I saw a job for WA Labor. I wasn't a member, wasn't really totally interested in local politics, to be honest. It was something that, you knew what your parents voted for, just was in that attitude of politics. It was taboo. We don't talk about it in public. So I was just with that. But I saw a job pop up and it was a really interesting job. It was, how can we get more women across WA involved in politics? And to me, that was just really interesting because I could see that was how we can allow women to participate in conversations that would drive change. How can we, empower them to have a voice? And so I thought I might give that a go. And so I applied for the job, which was a job that was based in Perth. But I said to them, I went, I would love to go for this job. And I don't think it needs to be done in Perth. And this is before the pandemic. I said, if you're trying to increase the number of women who are following WA Labor, who are into politics, you have to be looking right across the state. Unless what you're thinking is you only want metro women in this. If that's the case, fine. And they said, no, that makes sense to us. So I was lucky to get the job and it was an amazing opportunity because it opened me up to all these networks. I met Jackie Jarvis, who lived in my same town, but because of her relationship with politics, it then opened those doors. And I just got to build these professional networks within, the politics industry, industry leaders. And yeah, it was a fabulous opportunity to connect more women across the state into politics. And during my time, we were able to lift women's membership in WA Labor from 35% up to that 40% by the time that I left. So, and I think they've gone on really well since then. So, but then I was able to meet Jackie, and Jackie was heading up the RRR Network at the time. And so I started to work for Jackie, and Jackie's an incredible, dynamic regional woman.
You might have to fill in the Eastern Seaboard with
yeah. So Jackie Jarvis is our Minister for Agriculture here in WA. She was a former AgriFutures Rural Women's Award winner. She, I don't know, if you ever meet Jackie, you're suddenly in this zone of influence, power feeling. She just doesn't take any crap. She's just there to meet anyone and everyone, and she's a real advocate for women, you know. So, and I got to meet this woman in my town, and I was just like blown away. And so she took me on as her policy and research officer at the RRR Network. So my first big job was working on the National Inquiry into Sexual Harassment. And so I was able to sit with Jackie and work through that. We surveyed rural, regional, and remote women. I think we got something like 267 responses or something like that, which was the biggest survey at the time, community survey on that. And it was received such an overwhelming response. We must have got around 80 case studies of women sharing sexual harassment incidents in their workplace, and they were just horrific. It was just absolutely appalling stuff. And it was amazing in the sense that it actually just allowed women at that time, particularly in the agricultural space, to go, yeah, that happens to me and this is not right. And conversations certainly started to just snowball then for here in WA. A lot of media coverage. And then the National Inquiry then followed that. And I think there's been some positive changes since that time. I do feel that we still move at a glacial pace at many of these issues, unfortunately. And I am concerned, that we're, back to apathy again. I do think we probably could be taking some steps back currently in terms of attitudes to women that we really need to be standing strong with and keeping that moving forward. But yeah, so that was an amazing research piece that I was able to get a lot of learning from. And it really then made me value this concept of rural, regional and remote women that I hadn't actually connected to previously. Prior to that, it was, I live in the regions, I'm studying, I'm working, and I'm a townie. So I live in like 1,000 square meters, and that's big in town. I'm not out in the countryside. So for me, and I've always been like that. When I was a kid, I grew up in Boyup and that was a town that had about 600 people in it, and I was a townie. And you always felt that divide from the townies and the farmers but yeah, so I hadn't actually felt or acknowledged this issue of sacrifice, as a regional woman, just living here. And I know I live in a very fortunate place as well. So that's something else to take into consideration in terms of Margaret River, and it's what it has access to. But then talking to Jackie and doing that sexual harassment piece and really immersing myself into the RRR Network, I was able to go, right, yeah, it is a bit difficult living in the regions, and question, should it be that way? And perhaps we do need to be more front and centre with our local MPs and those sitting in the city, that you do need to be doing more work and more investment to make sure that the regions and the city are connected, that we don't have this divide. And so for me, I've just been, passionate about that ever since. Jackie stepped into politics, and I was, the baton was passed on to me to head up the RRR Network. And I took that on in 2020, and now 2025, I'm still here and, yeah, going strong.
I didn't mean to cut you off then. I was just going to say, I think that you you touched on it a bit earlier, this connection piece of like women in particular in rural towns, and sometimes that you can be existing in like parallel universes in the same small town and you don't realize that this bigger world exists there. And look, Maz, I might even call on you a bit in this part as well, because you've spent a lot of time living in the West. But something that I've observed over the years when I've spent time in Western Australia, particularly in the women's scene, is I have never experienced connection like women together in Western Australia. My first time I actually went over and spent any time there as an adult was, oh God, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and went to a conference in Fremantle that was, it was by Partners in Grain at the time. What are they called now?
Yeah. Ingrain or Intergrain? Oh, no, is that right?
No. Oh, okay. Well, this was, I'm sure it was a Partners in Grain conference. Anyway, this conference was insane in that, like, I'd been to a lot of women's things where it was quite often like a nice event and you talk about sort of like nice things, and there might be some well-being things and some basket weaving over here or whatever. I went to this conference and I was like, holy hat. It was so hardcore. It was the first time I'd ever heard women in farming operations referring to themselves as the CFO rather than I just do the books for like our multi-million-dollar farming operation. And the content at this conference was insane. It was like high level. They had insanely impressive speakers. The content was all really, really informative and like just, it was really not at all what I was expecting. And then we got because I was another girl from the East Coast that I'd gone over there with, and we got just gobbled up by the crowd. We got taken out to dinner that night, and I guess what happens so often with Western Australia, it's sort of like, you know, well, we've got to fend for ourselves because we're so far away. But I was able to really witness what that community piece looked like for women in the West. And I don't know, Maz, as far as you coming and going, like being an East Coaster and heading over to the West and things, did you sort of find that, or was that something just that the seagulls from the East sort of noticed at short periods of time when we've gone over there?
No, and I know this is about Kendall, so I won't speak for too long, but it is starkly different in my experience. And I will just share one sort of insight. So working up in the northern beef industry in the Kimberley and Pilbara region, the women are unequivocally an equal partner in the business. It's not even a thing, really. Like, I mean, Kendall, to your point, the RRR Network is imperative with addressing some of the challenges around childcare, you know, like the ICPA sort of style work, the RRR Network stuff is really important. Like, it is more difficult, but the women are strong, respected, seen as part of the business. It's kind of not really a thing. And then when I moved down south into the Southeast grains industry, the first field day that I went to, I was the only woman. And I was like, oh my, what, why, what, where? Oh. And it was just like, I remember, Jo, having the opposite feeling to you. I was like, where are the girls? Why? Like, they're part of the business. They're doing all the things. And I don't have words to wrap around that, except I was like, this is different. And I don't know whether it's because WA is remote and by its geography, people need to all hustle and everybody needs to sort of be included. And therefore, you know, it is about intelligent conversations, it's about robust outcomes and doing the hard yards. Whereas on the East, it's easy. Life is easier. Life is more noticed. You're sort of included in the political landscape more. I don't know, but anyway, that's all I'll say. But it is starkly different.
So interesting. I guess so. Then how do you, as an organisation, Kendall, how do you sort of, because that little example there, like you've got membership, I guess, up north who are dealing with very different issues and challenges and stuff to those that might be in, like, you know, the Western wheat belt that is a lot closer to Perth. Like, how do you sort of manage that as an organisation? Because the needs are just so vast.
Yeah. And look, when when the RRR Network was first established, it was established in 1996, and it was born out of the idea of women in ag, essentially. And it was a ministerial reference group that was set up within the state government. And so there was about 15 women who were appointed to this reference group, and they were the responding to policies and feedback to the Ministers of Regional Development, Minister of Agriculture. And that went up to 2016. And so we do have this really strong legacy of women in ag being at the RRR Network. And when we were trying to get funding with government, it was very clear to us that we had to be more than women in ag, that we actually had to be rural, regional, remote women, regardless of industry. And that was the message that was coming through, saying you're not going to get funding from us if you're only going to represent a small audience, in their view, across this state. And so for us at that point, so much of our women were from the wheat belt predominantly, would have gone up to the Midwest. You had a couple up in the Kimberley, those strong voices that were connected. Not much in the Southwest, because of that ag experience wasn't really a dominant industry, base. And it's pockets down in the Great Southern and hardly anyone in Kalgoorlie, in the goldfields. So when I came in, it was right, how do we shake ag but keep ag? So how do we just we are here for all women regardless of industry. And that has taken a lot to work through. But the latest work that we've done, I think, has been critical to kind of unlocking that, has been setting up a regional ambassador in every region. So we now have a woman from the Kimberley goldfields. We actually have 2 goldfields, one in Esperance, because that's, quite a contrast experience, a lived experience, Southwest, and even one in Perth. And she's a girl that grew up in the country and moved to the city. So we have women right across the state that meet monthly online, and they talk about what is it like for women, for them, in their region, because what we realised is it is so different being a woman up in the Kimberley compared to being a woman in the Southwest. Can't even compare. And that was starting to become something that we were tripping over regularly. Like, women would say, well, you're really only there for the Southwest women, because I'm in Margaret River. And so it was hard to represent this massive state in an authentic way, and a way that was actually going to achieve impact. And so we did set up this regional ambassador program, which has been exceptional. It started in 2024 early. We had all the women come to Curtin University for a 2-day professional development course, so they could learn how to deliver on this role. They've basically been given license to act as a RRR Network representative. We encourage them to speak with their local leaders around the issues impacting women, understanding what it's like to be a woman up north or a woman down south or Great Southern. And then they come together, and mostly the issues are similar, but there's just, when we're talking about how can we reduce that impact, or what could we do to support women, we find there's different ways that they think is suitable for their area to deliver, which has been such an eye-opener for us around what we can do. And I guess it's been really helpful for such a small organisation to be a lot smarter in how we use our resources, because we were taking a model that was, probably suitable to the wheat belt women and trying to expand that everywhere, and that just wasn't fitting. So it's been difficult, but I think we're actually getting there now.
Well, I've just, we're watching the time here. We've got about 15 minutes before we wrap up. I just wanted to pause and see if there's anyone that's on the call at the moment that has a question for you, Kendall. Otherwise, I've got another one if you want to flick your... Yeah, Angeline, go for it.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks for sharing your story, Kendall. It was fascinating to hear. You touched on so many things, but one question I guess I have is, how do you think that connectivity between urban and regional can be further enhanced? I know it's just a big, broad question and everyone talks about it and tries to do it, but just even hearing the WA story and, how one model didn't work across, right? And then you had to really kind of localize and execute it that way. And then, then you kind of go, right, now, how do we actually talk across states? How do we talk across, different sectors and industries and things like that? I'm just curious about your thoughts, things that you've tried, things that we can think of and help with.
Yeah, I feel that having really strong advocates, regional advocates, who have strong networks within those metro circles is critical. And I find that the RRR Network, we're really starting to get a run up now with this, because our advocacy pillar to our organisation is so important. It's equal to connection and it's equal to research. So I'm a part of the Thrive by 5 childcare campaign. I'm on the Working Women's Centre advocate reference group, on the SciTech group, and on the Horizon Power reference group. So our work is making sure that the issues of regional women around energy are communicated to the metro leaders, that the issues around working in the regions, what it's like, gets to the Women's Working Centre, and STEM opportunities are actually shared out to the regions, and so on and so forth. And I hope to get an article printed this week, Jo, around working from home. So I think having strong voices from the regions, constantly got that foot in the door saying, hello, what about the regions? Has to keep happening, because if we just keep our voice low and we don't do anything, they'll go back to going, that's all right, we'll just stick here. We'll just focus on here. I think also responding to opportunities. For us, the pandemic was a massive opportunity. It just unlocked the regions. It meant that the state had to look inward to keep its economy ticking. And there was all the regional people going, pick me. And it worked. And, we got to keep that momentum since the pandemic. And I think that that's something that we're probably fighting to hold on to right now. State government also end up investing, billions of dollars into roads so that people could travel to the region safely. I think they've got the biggest migration records from city migration to the regions reported in WA in recent years. So I think it's just making sure that you roll with those opportunities when they come. Any decentralisation of metro thinking, absolutely run with. But then for me, it's making sure that the foot is always in the door with those city key decision makers to say, that's all well and good, but how are you getting that out to the regions?
Yeah. Amanda.
Thanks, Kendall. I found your story fascinating, particularly, I guess, your experience and interest in counterterrorism and international relations. So I'm just wondering, because I think it's reflective of, lots of women where we might be doing one job, but we've got all of this experience in another area. From your perspective, how have you been, or how does that lens and your experience apply to the work that you're doing now?
I think, through that work, I was able to establish a really, really deep understanding of global issues, and even a deeper understanding of inclusion. And I think, when you really start to break down the issues around terrorism, for example, what motivates someone to do such, heinous crimes, and, more often than not, it's from a life that you're born into of violence and poverty. And, and I, weirdly enough, you start to really understand all these drivers towards violence. And you can look at that from, family domestic violence as well. We see that there's these cycles of violence. So for me, it was amazing to get a worldview on issues. And I think that also allowed me to look at big problems and have, be given opportunity to how would you solve that. And so I've always been drawn to big picture thinking, And I've been able just to take that as I move through my career. So when it was, how can we get women across WA involved into politics? I was like, great, love it. Let me see what I can do here. And I just have you know, worked with that style of thinking. And I guess, you know, building strategic plans, you know, all that type of work is just, yeah, absolutely just want to jump in and do that stuff, because it is, you know, how can we solve the likes of an organisation like the RRR Network, pretty much a fledgling not-for-profit, trying to become financially sustainable? How can we keep being viable? You know, how do we make sure that we don't get closed down and, you know, women get forgotten? So for me, those big issues really drive me. And I think I got that from working in international relations.
Thank you so much.
It's so interesting. I was just thinking while you were describing that about, like, I know that obviously the terrorism side of things is the ultimate extreme, but you would see the similar traits of that, like disenfranchised people feeling unseen by society and all of these things. Like, you would see similar
Yeah.
things. Like, you're hoping that, like, regional women in Western Australia don't become radicalised, but I think that there's definitely, like, a lot more of the similarities with that as well.
You know, when I spoke about that apathy before, you know, that just settling into your status quo, whatever that might be, you know, and I think if you look at those global issues and you know, if we look at, you know, Palestine and that, and, you know, living in a world of war, and that becomes your norm. And it's so hard for us to even consider that type of lifestyle. But they get up every day and they just operate, whatever that is. And I think, you know, when we go back to, you know, here, which is, you know, we're not comparing the issues of Palestinians or anyone in a war-torn environment to living in the regions and not being able to get to a specialist appointment. I understand that, but it does come from that same space of normalising your life and then having to decide, do I need to make a change to make a difference, or do I keep operating the way I am? So, yeah, it was an amazing experience to learn those global issues and to, weirdly enough, find yourself sympathising with terrorists at certain times. You know, you suddenly reading something and you go, "Oh my goodness, I'm not sure who to defend or who to support or," and so that was an amazing learning experience that I think I've taken with me, absolutely, when I meet all sorts of individuals. And yeah, so much. Yeah, I miss it, actually.
Well, I have a bit of a slight tiny gear change just before we wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted you to sort of touch on, I know that the RRR Network has established itself as a really interesting, I don't want to say nursery because that makes it sound like diminishing it, but like your board and how your organisation has been set up, it has been a really interesting place and organisation for, I know a lot of women in Western Australia have been able to use your board as a sort of cutting their teeth in the board scene and use it as a stepping stone to going into other positions. Can you talk me through, is that something that you guys are conscious of and active with as far as what your board looks like, how you recruit them and how you hold them?
Well, you know, just talking about them, you know, starting in 1996, I think I was looking at the numbers the other day, that it's been more than 110 women who have been either on that ministerial reference group or been on the board. So that's 110 women who've been afforded a leadership opportunity in WA. And that's quite substantial numbers when you're thinking about getting women to decision-making tables, giving them that type of professional experience. And I know in my time at the RRR Network, we did make a public address about this, going, the RRR Network board is a leadership opportunity available to all women. You know, you don't have to have this AICD criteria. You don't have to have been on a board before. You just have to be a member of the RRR Network. And we did actually, You know, membership beginning was $200 to be a member, and we've pulled that back to $50 because we wanted to be accessible to all women. And so I think it's an amazing opportunity. But, you know, even for us as an organisation, we've grown. Like, our governance in recent years has absolutely just every year we seem to be going up a rung on the ladder on our expectations of the board. And it's amazing that we can still offer this to women every year.
Yeah, that's amazing. I am going to wrap us up there, but I think that that's such an interesting and fabulous thing to wrap up on. 110 women, like, that's unreal. And so, again, nursery, I need to think of a new word for that, but like a training ground as far as, as far as
women. Yeah.
Kendall, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's always so interesting listening to how people end up where they end up. Yeah. And I think yours, I'm sure everyone on the call and anyone watching this back will agree that you going from like counter-terrorism into politics. Into
real estate,
counter-terrorism. It's a very, very interesting, wiggly like career path, but then so many common themes like threading through those things. So look, I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure everyone else really appreciates hearing what you've been up to and what such a fabulous organisation in the RRR Network is. So thank you so much.